Hi everyone, and welcome back to the 1000 Recordings to Hear Before You Die, Valkyries vlog series. And last time we had three very eclectic albums from Beck, the Mississippi Shakes, and finally the legend that is John Lennon. And today we'll be going by the same rules as we go through three more albums, so only listening to each album once, listening to each album uninterrupted, and not reading the expert analysis until I've listened to the album and given my opinion. And today we again have a really eclectic mix. We've got some metal, we've got some jazz, and we've got some acoustic. And let's get cracking with album number 7, which I am super excited about. Album 7 of 1000, we are getting there slowly but surely, is System of a Down with their phenomenal record Toxicity. And for the first time, this is an album that I know and I love. So I was really into System of a Down when I was a teenager. This album was released in 2001, and it's what got me into System of a Down, and actually into heavier music in general. It really introduced me into metal and some areas of heavier rock I didn't really listen to. System of a Down, Armenian-American in origin, formed in California in 1994 and still working to this day. They had a brief hiatus between 2006 and 2010. They have they've been nominated for 4 Grammy Awards, with 1 win for Best Hard Rock Performance for BYOB, which is a fantastic song that's not on this album. And they've also been nominated in various Kerrang Awards and other things as well. They're, super influential band from the early 2000s, I guess, until this day. So let's take a look at Toxicity. Toxicity itself was released on September 4th, 2001. It's 14 tracks long, and actually in total System of a Down recorded a colossal 30 songs and cut that down by 16 songs before they released the album. It has a running time of 44 minutes, so it's about a medium listen compared to what we've had so far, and it is ranked as number 44 of Rolling Stone's 100 Best Albums of the Noughties, so obviously commercially quite successful. Chop Suey, Aerials, Toxicity, the singles off the album, all ranked in the American Billboard 100 and did really well. And one of the things to be aware of with this one is this is the most contemporary album we've had so far. So 2001 is the most recent record we've had, and I'm not going to lie, I know this record really well already, but I'm going to listen to it again cover to cover rather than just listening to the songs that I love, and we will see what we think. Does it deserve to be a recording to hear before you die? Let's give it a listen. I'm a little biased on this album, and I could have told you before I listened to it again that it deserves to be on this list. It's a fantastic record. From the start, it gets you. Prison Song is this amazing mashup of a great metal track with great lyrics and great instrumentation in that really heavy System of a Down style, mixed with their massive social conscience. It's all about the prison system and wanting prison reform. And I'm not going to get into politics because that one is not what this vlog is about, but it just makes it a really interesting listen. And as you move through the album, what System of a Down, I think, do so well is they sit within a metal genre, but all their songs sound different to one another. They all have their own personality, their own sound. So you have Chop Suey with that really heavy rap style, the "Wake up! Why don't you wear a little makeup? You want to!" And it's almost like shouted rap. Then you move to Aerials, another really popular track, which almost feels a bit like a ballad. And then the lyrics on occasion are just so good. So Toxicity, one of my favourite all-time System of a Down tracks, and the title track of this album has great lines like "eating seeds for a pastime activity, the toxicity of our cities." And while it is an album that does at times feel like it's throwing social conscience at you in spades, it's always an enjoyable listen, and I think anyone could enjoy this album, even not fans of metal and heavier music. So for me, I think it's just a great record. I think they've got a lovely melodic but heavy sound. Serj Tankian has an incredible voice. It's so unique, so individual. And then just to throw in there, I mentioned they're Armenian American, and then Atwa, the last track of the album, is almost like they are throwing back their Armenian heritage, and it does sound a lot more world music than it does metal. So it's worth a listen just if you want to hear System of a Down start working in what I think are some more Armenian sounds into their tracks. And for me, the two tracks I've included on the playlist, my two favourites, are pretty predictable. Chop Suey, because it's Chop Suey, it's a monster, it's a gargantuan song, and Toxicity for those amazing lyrics and this really melancholic mood that just runs through the whole song. But I could have nominated Prison Song. Aerials, a lot of people might have gone for, not my favourite System of a Down track, but yeah, those two for me are on the playlist. So let's see what Mr. Moon made of System of a Down, Toxicity. I'm quite proud of my analysis on this one because in a lot of ways it's very similar to what our expert has picked out, and that is that while this is a metal record that has a lot of thrash elements and heavy metal aspects to it, they have a real variety in style, and what I hadn't realised is they take a lot of influence from really out there musicians like Frank Zappa, who are famous for being wildly experimental. And I think I mentioned on songs like Prison Song, they do that. And the reason this album appears to be in the list is because of the profound effect it had on the metal resurgence in the early 2000s. So you suddenly had bands like Korn and others appearing and bringing in elements of this System of a Down style. And in a way they were pioneers of this new frontier for metal. They were bringing elements of funk and other genres that hadn't been done before. So it gave what he calls a very dense, sludgy record, and he doesn't mean that in a bad way. Just it never lets up on you. The whole way through, you're being barraged by heavy chords and social conscience and noise, but in a really, really good way. So I think me and Mr. Moon are in firm agreement here. It's a great album, and the reason for that is the variation that System of a Down have, the way they change grooves and moods and styles throughout the songs so effectively. And the choices from Mr. Moon were Chop Suey, which I chose, Prison Song, which I so nearly chose, and Jet Pilot, which I think is probably the most intense song on the whole album. You can't listen to that without feeling mildly agitated, again, in a good way. So feel free to enjoy all those tracks. And now we're going to move on to album number 8. Album 8 on our great musical mystery tour is I See a Darkness by Bonnie Prince Billy. And I had never heard of Bonnie Prince Billy, and I've never heard of this album. And it's going to be hopefully a really nice adventure to get into the world of Bonnie Prince Billy. So a little bit about an artist I know nothing about. Bonnie Prince Billy has been active since 1993 and is still active to this day. Last record released in 2019, so only a year or so ago from the making of this vlog. He has 23 studio albums, not a ton of awards or anything, but a lot of very interesting descriptions. So known for what they call a do-it-yourself punk style, an Appalachian punk solipsist, which is the most fantastic title. Well done, Bonnie Prince Billy, for gaining a title like that. And it's primarily known for having really haunting melodies and somewhere straddling country, folk, rock, singer-songwriter style. I'm really intrigued by this album. So let's get a few details on I See a Darkness. I See a Darkness is the 6th of 23 studio albums from Bonnie Prince Billy, and it was released on the 19th of September 1999. It has a gentlemanly running time of 37 minutes and 56 seconds. And just to confuse this genre thing even further, the album description is actually listed as being indie folk. So we now have indie thrown in the mix alongside country and folk and singer-songwriter. So let's give this mystery record a listen and just see what we think of it. As I thought, it was a very interesting listen. So Bonnie Prince Billy, I See a Darkness, and I think for me my takeaway here is that there are some great individual tracks, some tracks that really resonate with me. There are others where, if I'm honest, it wasn't to my taste all the time. Occasionally I felt a little bit bored. I think, the issue I have with it is that he doesn't seem to change style between songs. Everything's very slow and delicate and moody, but it doesn't have much of a change of pace, which is something I like in albums. I like there to be a dynamic and a shift in the mood. So for me, not a huge fan of this album. However, I can easily choose two tracks that I really, really enjoyed. So I See a Darkness, the title track, track 3, is beautiful, really nice song. A Minor Place, the opening track, feels so different to the rest to me because it almost feels happy, which is not an emotion I get the impression Bonnie Prince Billy indulges in very often. And I also almost picked Madeline Mary, which I really loved as well. So maybe not for me one of the 1,000 recordings I'd like to hear before I die, but I definitely picked up some songs that I really enjoyed, and it's not just me. So when I was doing a little bit of research on Bonnie Prince Billy and this album, I did find out that the title track I See a Darkness was covered by the great Johnny Cash, with Bonnie Prince Billy singing backing vocals for him. So maybe not the perfect album, but I would recommend listening to those tunes just so you can kind of relax and get a bit. It's moody, it's nice, it's chilled, and it is full of almost nostalgia and kind of apathy. And so yeah, I like that bit of it. But let's see why Tom Moon thought this was one of the greatest 1,000 recordings to hear before you die. I'm intrigued by this now as well. So time for some expert analysis on Bonnie Prince Billy, I See a Darkness, and it appears this one is fairly simple, and the reason for its inclusion is because of Bonnie Prince Billy's sheer talent as a songwriter. And Tom Moon has him down basically as being just this beautiful southern writer. He says that with all the tracks you can almost envisage him sat on a rock somewhere in the desert, basically scrawling in a journal about all his inner emotion and turmoil, and that basically throughout this album, Bonnie Prince Billy is spilling his heart and his soul into everything that haunts him, and that he feels that he really brings that emotion through, noting that all 11 tracks on this are, quote, broody. And I think that's what I didn't like about it so much, and this just shows you how contextual and how different music is. Remember, there is no such thing as bad music. There is only music that is to your taste and music that's not to your taste. And this is interesting because some of it is to my taste, but too much of it, and I got a little bit bored. In terms of tracks that Mr. Moon has chosen, he has gone for Minor Place, which I chose, a lovely, lovely song, Another Day Full of Dread, and Nocturne. So if you want to give those a listen, feel free. Again, far more qualified opinion than mine. And now we will move on to album number 9. My cool cats, our 9th and final album for this episode is going to take us back into the world of jazz, and a world, as I'm sure you know from last time we covered jazz with Charlie Parker, that I'm a big fan of. And when I drew this from the book, I'd never heard of this artist. So the artist is Bobby Hutcherson, and it was only when I was talking to someone else who's a big jazz fan, they pointed out that I do know who Bobby Hutcherson is, because he was the vibraphone player for Herbie Hancock, the legendary jazz soloist Herbie Hancock, and this is obviously one of his solo works. And he's an amazing guy. He was active from the early 60s all the way till he died in 2016, so a career spanning pretty much half a century. And this is how, if we look here, he has racked up 43 studio albums, which I think is a record. I think it beats Charlie Parker, even though obviously Charlie Parker died very young. But that's only 43 studio albums as the lead. This doesn't include the majority of his work, which was as a vibraphone player for other legendary jazz musicians like Herbie Hancock. He was the winner of the Jazz Master Fellowship Award in 2010, which is a very prestigious award to win. And let's have a look at this album. So we've picked out an album called Components. Components is an early Bobby Hutcherson album. It was released in 1966, and for a jazz album it has a very small running time, really, of 41:05, but it says it's a Bobby Hutcherson album, but look at the other musicians on this: Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Joe Chambers. They're all big names in jazz. So, he was the lead musician on this, but really we're looking at a jazz supergroup when we look at components, which makes me even more excited to give this record a try. So let's give it a listen and see, is it jazzy or too jazzy? This is an amazing jazz album, and I really loved Charlie Parker with Strings back in episode 1, but it was from the 30s and maybe a bit old-fashioned really for my taste. It was an amazing album. Strongly recommend it. Would happily listen. This album, Components, is really more my choice of jazz music. It's made in the 60s and it is just populated with these amazing jazz musicians. So it's a Bobby Hutcherson album, but the vibraphone is not necessarily the lead instrument. And, the other instrumentalists are amazing. You've got Herbie Hancock, a legendary jazz pianist, doing amazing things on this album. You've also got great brass work on a lot of tunes, and the drumming from Joe Chambers throughout is just magnificent, particularly on the opening track, Components. He's just so tight, and the grooves are so cool and slick and quick. They're really fast as well. And all the way through this album, you could recommend any of these songs to anyone. They're fantastic. They've all got their own reasons. I'm going to keep it short on this analysis and just say, for me, it's an amazing jazz album filled with great musicianship, great tunes, and it's very unselfish in the way it's designed and layered as well. It all flows together. For me, my favourite tracks are Components, the title track, because of the amazing drumming and just the sheer energy of the song. And there's a song called Juba Dance, two-thirds of the way down, which I love because I think it really showcases Bobby Hutcherson on the vibraphone. It takes the lead in parts of that song, and I think we should celebrate Bobby Hutcherson a bit here because he's the lead musician on this album. But also, in the words of Ron Burgundy, it has a lot of jazz flute in it as well, which I can't resist. So for me, Components and Juba Dance, and I would thoroughly recommend this album. It is brilliant from start to finish, and definitely one of the 1,000 recordings to hear before you die, because I'm very glad that I've heard it, and I will continue to listen to it. And now we'll see what Mr. Moon thinks. So the reason this album, according to our expert, is in the 1,000 recordings is because of what Bobby Hutcherson contributed to the jazz world, and in particular the use of the vibraphone, which apparently before this was quite formulaic and is a support instrument. And it was apparently Bobby Hutcherson who took the initiative to actually use the vibraphone to set real tone in songs. It was never an instrument to lead and drive, but he uses it in great effect to build tone within jazz songs, and I can definitely see that. More intelligent analysis than mine, I think, which was just it sounded nice. But Bobby Hutcherson, massive influence on jazz through his contribution to the vibraphone, and this album is listed as one of the ones where he really started to bring that formula together and started to really work with tones and grooves. And it wasn't about the technicality of what he was playing, it was about the tones he was setting as a musician. And I've definitely learned something there, and it's something I might take into my songwriting, to think more about tone and what we're trying to put across to the listener than necessarily the complexity or exactly what it is I'm playing. So wonderful album. Please go listen to it. It's cracking. In terms of the songs that Mr. Moon picked out, let's have a quick look. He chose Component, Little Bee's Poem and Movement, so feel free to give those a listen if you would like. And that is the end of album 9 and our final album of the day. Thank you for joining me once again for episode 3 of this vlog series on the 1,000 records to hear before you die. And I think today we had a really good variety again. I absolutely loved Components, my favourite, one of my favourite new discoveries in this process so far. Toxicity was already an album I knew and loved, and I think it's really great that we have contemporary records like Toxicity in this process, because it was very influential, really cool album, really fun. And while I wasn't a huge fan of Bonnie Prince Billy, I would recommend going and listening to a few tracks just so you've experienced it, and you never know, you could be a huge fan of that kind of subdued singer-songwriter style, this simplicity that he has. So, but until next time, feel free to check out our debut album, our other vlogs, our lyric videos, and I will return for episode 4 with another wide-ranging set of artists and albums. Until then, bye for now.